오늘은 쪽방촌에 대해서 이야기를 부탁드립니다. 쪽방촌이 무엇입니까?
A slum in the city.
Slum in the city.
Yeah. So like in any other country, there's always a place called slums, right? Where the poor people group together and live. And Korea is not exempt from this. People might not think Seoul have slums since it's such a technologically advanced city. But there are slums in Seoul, and we call this in Korean 쪽방촌. It's a room where the size of it is just enough for one person to fit in. And you don't pay deposit payments or nothing like that, just monthly rental fees. And it has no kitchen or nothing like that kind of sort. So you take care of everything in one room, no toilet, just one public toilet for everyone to use in the building.
그럼 방 하나를 이야기하는 거네요.
Yeah.
방 하나,
Yeah.
딱 하나. 그럼 이 쪽방촌들은 어디에 위치하고 있어요? 이제 이 쪽방촌이라 불리는 주요 이제 밀집 지역들이 있잖아요. 거기 좀 설명해 주세요.
There are main areas in Seoul where these 쪽방촌s are located in, and those are 종로, 남대문, 용산, and 영등포. Yeah, those are the main areas in Seoul that all these slums or 쪽방촌 is located at. And these are the main 5 capital areas of 쪽방촌 in the city. And about 3,300 people live in this area. And most of the people living here are old people in the age range of 50 to 85. So if you are 55 years old, you are considered young in that area.
오, 젊은 축에 속하는구나.
Yeah. So you can see how the age ratio is very high here. This kind of living facilities came about from dividing one big space into small rooms when there used to be a lot of labor workers, and this was made for them to live with the basic, or not basic, the minimum standard of living, so they can save up money and stuff like that back in the days. And the 5 main areas, like I talked about in Seoul, the people here are mostly Koreans, and you go to these areas like Kuro or Kumcheongu, most of them are Chinese and foreign factory workers.
아, 다른 거네요.
Yeah, so this is a bit different depending on what area you're at.
이게 비슷해 보이지만 실제로는 이제 다른 좀 개념이네요.
Yeah, yeah. Then we call these areas where most Koreans live 쪽방촌, and for the areas where the foreigners live mostly, we call them 벌집촌. Yeah, so it's a bit different.
그 벌집이란 단어가 그거잖아. 그 beehouse.
Yeah, hive, beehive.
beehive라고 해요.
Yeah, so 벌집, 벌 is bee, 집 is house, and again, 촌 is like fucking like a group of shit.
쪽방촌이라고 하는 곳은 이제 어떤 사람들이 살아요?
There are research data done on this, and out of the main areas in Seoul, there are 3,201 people living in 3,504 rooms, in which the rooms were made out of 287 buildings. Okay? And this is from paperwork data, and in reality, most of them, they don't use paperwork anyway. So in average, it's said about 70,000 people live in this kind of environment. 40% of the people here are recipient of basic living because they live below the standard of the minimum wage standard. And 45% of them are elderly who live alone or handicapped people. They're neglected from the Korean society.
사회에서 이제 가장 최고로 약자들이네요. 늙고 장애인이고 돈도 제일 없고.
For a day to live here, they pay about 7,000 to 8,000 won. So if you calculate that for a month, depending on the area, they pay about 100,000 to 200,000 won a month. That's like $100 to $150 if you convert that.
그래도 비싸진 않네요. 확실히 좀 저렴하네요.
For them, it's probably expensive.
그럼 이제 그들은 거기서 이제 어떤 식으로 생활을 하고 있는 거예요? 그 쪽방촌이란 데서?
Okay, so the size of the room, like I mentioned before, is a space just enough for one person to fit in. So it's like a floor of an SUV or car, a sedan. So if you're an adult male and you lay down, you won't be able to fully stretch your legs properly.
아, 그냥 원룸이 아니네요. 엄청 작은 원룸이네요.
It's fucking like it's a prison, man. So there's no private toilet or shower. So don't expect that. It's all public. And there's only one for one floor. So that's fucked up. No proper front door. So people usually hang ropes in the entrance of the room. And they like put blankets over it to act as a room to segment their like living area.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about prisons in like Asia or Latin America, you probably get a good idea of what this facilities look like. In the winter, the heating is fucked up, so a lot of people die or get common frostbites all over the motherfucker. So to fight against the cold, they lay newspapers on the floor like, to create some kind of thickness to fight against the cold. And people with a little bit of money, they can use electric warming mats.
Mm-hmm.
But most of them don't even have that much money to buy that. So they boil up water, put them in a glass bottle, and then they use that as like a hot bag.
Oh.
In the winter, so they don't get cold. And since the rooms are so tightly like seated and knitted together, one outfuse of electricity can just bring the whole shit down in an instant. And during the summer, it's fucking hot and humid in Korea. And these rooms don't have any windows. So they have to rely on fans. Don't expect any ACs because that's just like a privilege way, way beyond their standard, level of living. So don't even expect that. And it's not easy for them to use electric fans because it takes up a lot of electricity as well, right? And all of the people living there, they pay together. So if 3 out of 10 of them use a lot of like electricity than the standard of living, then all of their rent pay have to go up. So they are limited on using electricity as well. So during the summer, they take their clothes off, they sit outside, and this is a problem for women living there since it can cause a lot of sexual misconduct, and not to mention theft and all other crimes, that may lurk there. So the people living here usually cook with one burner, and not a lot of them have freezers, which you can probably get a second-hand freezer for $10, and they don't even have that money. So during the winter, they store their food outside the windows, and they get a bit of food from the charity organizations, but usually they live off eating dried food, cans, cup noodles, and etc., etc. And they spend their time just watching TV where they fix up from the streets or use smartphones just as like a TV.
그러면 이 사람들은 이제 수입은 어디서 발생해서 그걸로 생활을 하는 거예요?
The people get their money from the government since they are classified as people who can't work properly. They can't even get a standard minimum wage job because 1, they're fucking old, 2, they're handicapped, or 3, they're like neglected from society so much that they fucked up their mental state, right? So none of them want to hire them and shit like that. So they get like money from the government or some like charity monies and food. So they get about $400 to $500 a month from the government. And they have like medical bills to pay and shit like that. So most of them go out and do recycling jobs and pick up, fucking trash. And they go to another recycling facility and they get like money from that. So basic jobs. And if you have a bit of strength, and let's say if you're quite strong and young and you're able to move, they do daily labor work in construction sites. But not all of them, or most of them, they don't even have the strength to do that.
그러면 이제 제가 들었을 때는 고시원이랑 되게 비슷한데 이제 고시원을 가면 되지 왜 여기서 머무는 거예요? 고시원과 무슨 차이점이 있길래?
고시원 is like an upgraded version of the slum rooms of 쪽방촌s. So it's a bit more clean, and some of them give food daily with shower and toilet in the room as well. But the rent fee is twice as much. Yeah. So even it may seem, not that much to the regular working person. For them, for the people who live in 쪽방촌, for them to go to 고시원, their rent fees go out twice as much, and that's a big money to them. And in 고시원, you can't cook your own food in your room because there's like a public kitchen where you share with other people. So that's the difference between 쪽방촌 room and 고시원. Another difference would be most of the people who live in 고시원 are young people and students or young foreigners who come to Korea just to work for some basic jobs, just to start off their career. The people living in the 쪽방촌, or the slums as we say it, have a good vast of community because they've been neglected by the society so much. So they're looked down upon more. Whereas people who live in 고시원, they're young, they have their own reasons to be there, but most of them can get jobs. Most of them are healthy. Most of them don't plan to live there long anyway. Whereas people who live in 쪽방촌, they have to stay there and they plan to live there for a long time. People who live in the slums they have to have a good vast community system, so they kind of fend off each other, sharing information. Whereas for 고시원, it is not the case because most of them can get out of the living style, like I said, because they're young and they don't plan to stay there for a long time. So that's the major difference.
오케이. 그러면 이 쪽방촌 말고 다른 주거지를 구할 수는 없나요? 쪽방촌이 왜 생겨나게 된 이유가 뭐예요?
Yeah, because for these people, it's almost impossible for them to live in Seoul in the standard living, payment range, because you need at least $10,000 to $20,000 as a deposit payment to get a contract of living, even if it's a small one room. And this is the minimum requirement. And for many people, this is just too much. So in Seoul, a lot of charity and government system is put in place for people who can't level up to the standard of living, hence making these so-called slums or 쪽방촌s a business for the people, the recipients of the basic living to go to. So basically it's just a fucking system for the government to put all of them into one place and kind of segregate them from the rest of the society. And of course they can go out of Seoul and go to the countryside, then etc. etc. But then again, not a lot of jobs are offered to them, especially in the countryside. So there's less opportunities for them to succeed or make a basic standard of living as well. And even if they go out of Seoul, the government, they don't give those people the $400 to $500 a month, which they used to get because they are out of the area. So now you don't get no basic fucking funding. You have no opportunity or less opportunity if you go out of Seoul. And there's less 쪽방촌s out of Seoul anyway. So really they have nowhere to go. So for them, they might as well stay here in Seoul with minimum to below the minimum standard of living than to risk more going off to another area. And out of the Korean population, about 3 to 5% fit into this slum criteria. And although they get some money monthly from the government, it's in reality it's fucking not much, because they have medical bills to pay and shit like that. Most of them are handicapped, and they're like really old, so they have a lot of like health issues. And if you compare the standard of the currency increasing day by day, year after year, the payment they get from the government monthly, they just can't level out the ends of survival. But they have no choice to live in these slums, because they can't go nowhere else. Even a small ass fucking room called one rooms, like you said, they require at least $2,000 of deposit payments. Where are they gonna get those kind of money, man?
오케이. 그러면 이 쪽방들은 그냥 계속 살면 되잖아요. 여기 사람들. 근데 왜 이게 되게 이슈까지는 아닌데 사회의 문제라고 지적을 많이 하거든요, 뉴스에서. 근데 이게 도대체 뭐가 문제인 거예요, 대체?
Because of the health standards, and like I mentioned before, it's kind of neglecting all these weak-ass people into one area, so they're segregated from the normal population or standard population of people in Korea. And you can't get these rooms or slums or jokbangs on the internet. It's not out on the internet. It's not out for the public to see. You have to go visit there personally, and some of them are not really openly advertised. So that, in retrospect, gives you that image of kind of like a black market kind of feeling. And if you go into these areas and actually see how they live, it's no different from a prison cell. But the landowners or the building owners give out or rent out these facilities with minimum, investment, and they get fucking money out of that. At least provide the basic need for them, like hygiene needs, like toilet. Like we talked about, there's only one toilet in the fucking whole floor. So if you have like a 4-story building, there's only 4 toilets or showers for like 300 people to use, and that's fucked up. Plus, if you look at the living standard size that is required for people to pay in Seoul compared to the space that they are provided, it's not cheap if you calculate the meter by meter and shit like that. So it may look cheap, or they might advertise it as cheap to the people who live there, but in reality, they're getting fucking ripped off for that standard of living. Landowners or the landlords or the building owners, they know this, and they fucking use this as their advantage, because they know the people who live there, they have no choice. Where are they gonna go, A lot of them become homeless. If you go to Seoul Station and shit like that, there are a lot of homeless people, but they're being cleaned out by the police and shit. So they have to fucking scavenge into like forest and stuff like that for the image of Seoul, clean and friendly. Where are they gonna go? They're not gonna go to fucking other one rooms because they have no money, so they have no choice to go to these slums. And the landlords know this, that they have no choice, and they don't invest anything really into the building facilities. And most of the transactions are done by cash. And what does that mean? You don't pay tax, and you could always go under the radar with it. And for one person, they could save about $3,000 a tax in revenue. So it's a good business for the landlords to convert their building into these like small prison cell looking slum dash facilities and get the so-called neglected people from society and make a good standard of living out of it. If you have a building, right? If you calculate it, 1 square meter of the living space, you could get about $80.
Mm-hmm.
You could get about $80 usually.
Mm-hmm.
And if you calculate that to the place where BTS used to reside in, they pay about $100 to $110 per square meter of living, right? So these little slums, the landlords convert this building into little slums and square feet meter and shit like that. They get about $80 as well from that living space. So the standard of living is very different, but the money they get from this is no different from a high-end living facility like the places where BTS used to live in.
비교를 해봤을 때 그렇다.
Yeah. If you really go into the living space, the metric system itself, it's no different for the people who live in the slums. They pay the same amount of money as living in a fucking luxurious apartment complex. And that's how the landlord here, who convert their buildings into these like little slums, use the math and make a lot of money out of this by exposing and exploiting this. And they get no tax in it, so.
그러니까 가격 대비 방이 결국 큰 것도 아니고 가격을 따졌을 때 이 작은 방도 굉장히 비싼 것이다.
So the size of this room is about 140 centimeters to 210 centimeters. Yeah, so it's fucking small. It's like a size of a car. And imagine how many people you can fit in to this area, this kind of space, and you get $100 and $150 out of it a month. You can make 10 rooms, right?
와,
No contract, only cash. They convert their fucking building, so they have like at least 30 to 40 rooms.
하여튼 뭐 화장실도 하나밖에 없고 시설도 뭐 망가졌다고 해서 고쳐주지도 않고 그 영상이 되게 많거든요. 한국에 다큐멘터리 막 바퀴벌레 엄청 많이 나오고 진짜 그 사진을 봐야 이게 실감이 갈 것 같더라고. 이게 설명을 했을 때보다는 사진 보면 사람들 진짜 다리도 못 펴고 누가 가져갈까봐 이렇게 방 안에 이렇게 다 갖다 두고 그래서 실제 사이즈가 어느 정도냐면 우리 지금 여기 화면에 보이는 거에 하나 더 있다고 보면 돼. 그냥 그 정도가 다야. 거기 안에서 먹고 자고 싸고 다 하는 거. 밥도 하고.
You're better off living in a car. So that's the truth about the slums in Korea. And it's a good business.
그래서 이 사람들 한 달에 기초생활수급자 그 비용 받는 거에서 보통 지출이 60%가 방세로 나가고 나머지로 이제 밥을 해결해야 되고 겨울도 지내야 되고 하는데 뭐 당연히 전기세 일정 부분 넘으면 딱 쫓겨나거든요. 그래서 바로 노숙자 돼. 그리고 여기 이 쪽방촌의 가장 핵심은 서울에 사는 이유가 그 뭐 아까도 얘기를 좀 하긴 했지만 이 사람들이 지방으로 내려가면 더 잘 살 수 있거든요. 방 사이즈는 같은 돈으로 지방이 더 싸니까 집이. 그런데도 지방을 못 가는 이유가 서울에 있어야 그나마 밥이라도 받아. 그래서 어쩔 수 없이 서울에 살고 일자리를 구하려면 그래도 인구가 많은 곳에 있어야 서울에 살 수 있다고 하더라고. 그래서 되려 가난한 사람들이 더 도시를 벗어나기 힘들다고 하네요. 요새는.
Sad.
오케이, 오늘 여기까지 합시다. 고생하셨습니다.